Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Energy Management 101, the building blocks for an effective energy management program. My name is Amber Artrip. I'm the VP of Marketing here at EnergyCAP, and I'm joined today by Thomas Diliberti, one of the newer members of our team, who is our Senior Manager of Energy and Sustainability. But before we get started, I do want to address a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our website and will be emailed to all registrants within 24 hours of this recording. We also are taking questions throughout the entire presentation. So please feel free to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the Zoom webinar platform to input your questions as they come up throughout the presentation. We may address them in real time if it's timely, or we will save them for the end of the webinar where we'll have 10 to 15 minutes to address as many questions as possible. And with that, I would like to thank Tom for being on the webinar with me today. Tom comes to us with a bunch of experience in the industry, over 20 years in energy leadership. So Tom, why don't you tell the folks today a little bit about yourself and how you got to be here?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Amber. Hey, excited to be here today. I come from a background of education. I started my professional career as a high school physics and math teacher. Enjoyed doing that for a 15-year period of time, just enjoy being in front of my classes and teaching content. And that spun off into an opportunity to become a large district energy manager. My large district in Michigan was looking for an energy manager to manage the buildings. And that was my first foray into energy management, and I just loved it. It was a great opportunity. I worked for a couple of years, helping my district save a lot of money and a lot of energy, built a lot of great relationships. And that then turned into an opportunity to go on the road and work with clients from all over the country. So I work with hundreds of clients from coast to coast in many different industries, doing the same thing, providing support, energy management ideas and strategies with the end game of saving energy and saving money and helping them to become more sustainable. Okay, so today's agenda, what I'd like to do is buzz through just kind of the why and the what is energy management. Just talk about those things quickly, just make sure we're level setting, we're all on the same page. And then I'd like to spend a handful of minutes talking about a philosophical approach to energy management called the energy pyramid. And most of today's presentation is going to focus on the building blocks of energy management. I want to share some ideas, some thoughts, and really create a mindset with you and for you, what I think is just so important as you start down this road to become more efficient. I think it's really a mindset that a person, a group, an organization has to have if they're going to be successful with good energy management strategies. Okay, Amber, let me hand it back to you. I think we have a couple poll questions that we want to get going. We're curious today to see who's in the call. So we wanted to find out how long people have been in the energy industry.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got over 450 people from all over the world joining us on today's session. So it's helpful for us to add a little bit of context just to understand who you are, how long you've been in this industry, so that we can kind of consider that as we're presenting.
Yeah, great. It looks like as the results are coming in, that it seems to be leaning towards people that are just beginning their path. And that's really the demographic that we were targeting this webinar to today. You'll see as we go through the webinar, at the conclusion, we'll talk about another series of webinars we're going to have and offer, which start to raise the bar and start to get deeper into the energy management strategies. But the purpose of today's energy management approach is just to do that high flyover, just give people an idea of the principles and ideas that they should have as they start down this path.
I will say it's awesome to see, 32% of the folks with over 10 years experience. That's amazing. I've been in this industry not as long as Tom, but going on 8 years. And I'm telling you what, as Tom and I were building this presentation, even I learned a ton just from kind of absorbing all of the experience Tom is bringing to the table. So we're really excited to have you. And maybe
that's
thing.
Yeah, fantastic. So it looks like it's our group is a little bit diverse in their the number of years in the industry. And then the second question we have here, Amber, if you don't mind putting that up, is just wanting to understand your reason for being here today. Are you just curious? Do you want to kind of learn a little bit? Do you have something specific you're looking for? And so if you could take a second to respond to these statements as well, we'd love to understand why you chose to spend some time with us this afternoon.
I'm hoping to learn a little bit about all of these things personally.
Yeah, what I've learned over my 20 years doing this is there's always nuggets to pick up as you listen to different people speak and you attend different webinars or sessions at conferences. Sometimes just that little nugget can make a world of difference for how you approach something and also the opportunities that you might see with your organization in order to improve its efficiency.
Awesome. Well, it looks like 67% of folks joining us today are really keen to understand strategies to help their organization save money, which is great. We love to hear
Yep.
that, and that's a big part of energy management. So no surprise there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so with that, why don't we kick off, Amber? If you could pop up the first slide and let's just start to talk about energy management. Okay, so let me just see here. I've got something in the middle of my screen. I guess got to drag it out of the way. So I wanted to start with just giving you the what I'll call the textbook definition of why, or I misspoke. What is energy management? So energy management is the proactive and systematic monitoring, control, and optimization of energy consumption to conserve use, reduce costs, and minimize environmental impact. The reason I chose to read that and why I wanted to include in the presentation, I think it's a nice, short, succinct way of describing what this is all about. You'll see through today's webinar and through the future webinars, there's just so many details of this. There's so many layers to what you can do and the opportunities that exist out there. But it's always under the guise that it's about saving energy, reducing use, and trying to save some money. So it's going to start with monitoring your utility bills. And we're going to get into that pretty deeply in the presentation here. You're very likely going to be implementing some energy efficient technologies as part of this solution. And one of the themes for today that I want to speak a lot about is culture, because although implementing energy efficient technologies is a huge benefit, another very significant part of this is getting people on board in dealing with the culture of energy savings. And then it's optimizing energy patterns. It's optimizing what's happening in your facilities, whatever your process is. It's just trying to make it better in order to squeeze out as much saving as possible. So Amber, the next slide, please. So we talked about the what. Now let's talk about the why. Well, as we just learned through the poll here, it saves money. That's why most people are driven to learn about this. People want to save money. What you might not know or maybe have really never reflected on is that energy is typically the second most expensive line item in the budget after personnel costs. So if you are part of your financial team and you're looking for ways to save some money, well, you probably want to target the elephants first. You want to target the areas where you're spending the most money because those many times will be the place you can save the most money. And so energy represents that opportunity. And it's very common that you're going to find strategies and ways to do so. Another thing to consider is utility prices are volatile. You might be a purchaser of natural gas and plan to use a certain amount of natural gas through the heating season, and all of a sudden we have a really cold winter. You might be in part of the country where the temperature gets really cold, and all of a sudden now you're buying gas at a very high rate because you're using way more gas than expected. So utility prices can be volatile. You can find yourself in situations where you're spending a lot more money than you expected, but by putting together a plan, you can mitigate that a little bit. You can manage that a little bit better and manage your costs. Another thing that's part of our world now is there's more people returning to the office, right? People through the pandemic, people work from home, and more companies are expecting and almost demanding people return back to the office. And so if you know you've got people coming back to the office, might be the perfect time to start to implement some energy conservation measures. Introduce some new processes, some new procedures, so people are better at doing some simple things to mitigate those additional costs. But knowing that it's going to happen, this is the time to take action. As we all know, it's good for the environment. Something that you might not know is many times when you start to institute energy management philosophies, strategies, procedures, it improves occupant comfort. Because what's happening behind the scenes, what I've learned over years doing this, many times it's the equipment that's running after hours or it's running incorrectly. It's places where people are uncomfortable. Those devices are very energy inefficient and they're creating occupant discomfort. So by fixing them and seeking remedies, maybe replacing them is the right answer, you can improve comfort and increase productivity. It's a wonderful benefit of the energy management process. Also, by studying your bills and getting to know more about your buildings, it allows for better decision making. You'll see in the course of this presentation, data is such a critical part of making this successful. And so that data combined with ongoing utility data and looking at costs over the course of time, you'll see it's going to be much better for planning purposes, whether it's in the short term for building utilization or maybe even long term for capital investments. Those things also could be greatly improved going through this process. Something that we're all very well aware too in our environment is there's this push for efficiency, right? Our government's looking for ways to improve efficiency. Well, quite simply, it's hard to argue against efficiency. It'd be hard to walk into a meeting and say, doggone it, I don't believe in efficiency. That's just, I don't think, a very logical argument at all. And so we seem to be right in our society right now in America to seek efficiency, to save money. And I think, seize the moment. Now is the time. It's on people's minds. And like I say, just can't argue against it. That's the flow. That's the way everything's going.
I love
So
it.
next slide. Yeah.
I love watching the chat, you guys, and seeing where everyone's from. So feel free if you haven't yet listed where you're from. It's awesome to see. Feel free to enter the chat.
Yeah, perfect. So what Amber's popped up on the screen here is something we call the energy pyramid. And there are different versions of this. If you were to search it online, you'd see there are a number of variations of this. We at EnergyCAP here, we create this because it really tells our story, which I think is the story about energy management. Like anything you build, the foundation is critical. And if you notice the foundation of the pyramid here, it's built on energy information. Before you start moving up the pyramid and trying to achieve your objective of more efficiency, you have to start with good energy information. So that starts with utility data. It's information about the buildings. It's blueprints. It's as-built drawings. It's anything and everything you can find out about a building. That energy information is critical. And why I think that's the logical place to start is it's going to take you time to find all of that information. And if you're typical of one of those organizations that I work with around the country, if you've got buildings that are 50, 60, 80 years old, many times those buildings have blueprints that are someplace and you got to hunt them down. I mean, it might be in a boiler room someplace. It could be in some mechanical room someplace. As you set out on this path, in the beginning here, slowly and steadily collecting everything, bringing it into one place, sets you up for future success because then you have it when you need it. So let's suppose you start that now and you start to gather your stuff. The place I'd say to move to next is doing utility auditing. What I would say, again, based on my experience, is that most entities, if you're bigger than 20, 30 buildings, or if, let's say you've got 150 meters, it is very, very rare that there aren't mistakes littered through that billing information. It is very, very common. I would say, and I don't know this statistically, like I couldn't prove this, but I would say it's 3 to 5% of the bills. There are going to be mistakes. There's going to be misbills or rebills that were not done correctly. There's going to be mistakes with meters, mistakes with multipliers on the bill. I could tell you story after story of things I found working around the country, and it's not exclusive to electricity or gas or water. It's every single type of bill, and it affects nearly all the companies that I've ever worked in and around. So I describe this as just the human condition. Everybody's trying to do the right thing. People are trying to get it right, but mistakes happen. And so bringing it back to energy management, because we know that's part of the process, let's take advantage of it. Let's fix it. Let's get those bills. Let's understand it. Let's look at rate tariffs. Let's take a look at a bunch of stuff on the bill and understand it so that we're maximizing the benefit. And that happens to be one of the webinars that we're going to have in the future here, is talking specifically about utility bills, because there's so much information I can share about that and opportunities to save. But getting back to the pyramid, if we move up the pyramid to energy conservation, many people think energy conservation and energy efficiency are the same, and I would beg to differ a little bit. Energy conservation is about the people. It's about the culture. It's about setting an expectation that people contribute to energy use, and people can contribute to saving energy if they're taught, if there's expectations set, if there's reasonable measures taken behind the scenes. Many times people can be a big part of the solution and a big part of the problem. So recapping from the bottom, let's get the information, let's start auditing it, and let's start teaching the people. Because if the people start to get on board, you start to build a momentum, and everything else in the pyramid gets easier and better and becomes a greater opportunity for savings. So now that fourth layer, energy efficiency, this idea is about stuff. Energy efficiency in my mind is it's buying new stuff. It's new, more efficient lights. It's new mechanical systems. It's control systems. It's insulation. It's weather stripping. It's spending money, in some cases, capital expenditures to improve your facilities so that they run more efficiently. Now, you might say, well, Tom, why wouldn't you flip flop that with energy conservation? Why wouldn't you start that? Well, one of the things that happens if you do energy conservation after energy efficiency, you might be making decisions based on how people function now and not how they will function later. And you might be oversizing equipment, or you might be making decisions that you regret, because if you start conservation before efficiency, I think you'll see it's going to pay bigger dividends. And so that's why I would set it in that way. And the same thinking holds true with renewable energy. If you're putting in a solar array, or maybe you're looking at battery storage, suppose you haven't asked the people to change their behavior, or you haven't modified the operation of the systems of your facilities. So let's design the solar array around that particular situation. Again, people aren't really cognizant of their energy use. So they're using more energy, so you have to put in a solar array to accommodate that. Well, what about if you teach the people first? You tell the people, hey, let's turn your lights off. Let's manage your computer. Let's do these simple things around the office or around your space, your classroom, whatever it might be. If you do that first, many times it allows you to buy a smaller solar array that will meet the needs of that particular building or that particular organization. And it's true for anything, whether it's solar array, battery storage, even geothermal. Like if you're going to design a brand new building, well, the occupants of the building are going to help contribute to the load the building needs to serve. And so let's get the people fixed first before we start to change the mechanical system.
Yeah.
Amber, let me pause here for a second. Were there any questions or comments on that? I'd like to. This is such a critical part. I just want to make sure that I just make sure that people are in tune with what I'm saying.
No questions yet, but I just want to emphasize, because I was one of the people who asked the questions like, why is energy conservation there? Why is it in the middle? Because normally you'll see people kind of jumping to energy efficiency, and some people even jumping to renewables.
Yeah.
Before. And I think it's just a really strong visual to see it in a pyramid like this, because each of these blocks really build upon each other and allow you to right size your projects. So I just think this is a brilliant visualization. And we did get one question, actually. We can jump in.
Yeah.
What are some tips to obtain buy-in with leadership if they
Yeah.
do not support energy improvements over reliability?
Yeah. You know what? I think it starts with just a good conversation, preferably face to face. It's getting, and it's one of the slides that I'll cover here in a minute, but we got to get everybody in the room so people can see, understand, and appreciate different perspectives, because the business official and the CEO might see things different than the facilities manager or the operations director within the facility. So for now, let me just suffice to say, I think you got to get people talking, and I can give you some ideas about making a case for why it makes sense. But let me kind of punt on that just for a little bit, because it's part of the presentation here in a second. I'll speak to a little bit more then. I did want to circle back to renewable energy. And if I may be a little bit crude here for a second, I've told people renewable energy is the sexy thing that people like. What people think about renewable energy is it's something you can write about in the paper or in your newsletter or communicate within your community. Hey, we put these new solar arrays in the building. And so people many times will vault to the top of the pyramid because they can write it up and it can be a positive. And I would never say it's a negative, but I think it would be more of a positive if you're patiently making these other changes first and then execute renewable projects and strategies. And so I can understand why people might be motivated to do it, but I hopefully through what I've described here in the last few minutes, just maybe caused a moment of pause, give you a chance to think about it a little bit and whether it's worth reconsidering if that's the course you've taken in the past.
I think we're on a mission to make energy conservation and energy efficiency sexy again.
I love it. Let's do it. Okay, next on the list, and this is going to be the thrust of the presentation, I want to talk about the building blocks of energy efficiency, from making a plan and gathering information building these strong relationships we were just alluding to, learning about your facilities and taking action. So it falls into these 5 major categories. And as I mentioned early on, again, this is intended just to be that high flyover, to just give you thoughts and ideas. We're going to unpack each of these in greater detail in future webinars, but I thought it would be valuable to you to hear the full story from top to bottom first, and then we could keep drilling in deeper and deeper. Okay, Amber, if we can go to the next one. Okay, so we had talked about this just a couple minutes ago. I referenced this to just about establishing an energy committee. So let me slow down on this. So an energy committee, I think, needs to be represented by everybody within the organization or a representative of. So a lot of the organizations I work with were schools. So let me just use that as an example, but this is true regardless of your organization. So the superintendent needs to be part of that conversation. The business official or chief financial officer, the facilities director, the teachers union president needs to be there, the operations director, and anybody else who's an influencer within the organization. Getting a group of people together, and I'd recommend no more than 10, try to limit it to a reasonable number of people you can put around a table and have a conversation. But many times, all of these people do not come together and have conversations. Everybody lives in their own world. We function in silos as human beings, is what I've learned. Everybody's trying to do the right thing, but there's just not enough time. We're all busy. And so part of bringing everybody together begins to build an aura of collaboration and gives you a shared purpose. So if a committee comes together to talk about these things and starts to understand the demands being placed on the other groups, you're more likely to come up with things that are effective and things that fit. Certainly, there's always going to be pressure to save energy and save money, and the CFO is going to push to do these things. And that voice needs to be heard. But I would guess, and what I've seen is many times that CFO has not necessarily been in the same room as some of the others. And it's good for him or her to hear those other perspectives, because I think it tempers it a little bit. And again, moving in the same direction is just so critical. So once you bring the people together, what you got to do next is develop an energy policy. An energy policy can be as simple as everybody's an energy user and everybody's entitled or expected to become an energy saver. All right, so it's a statement by the organization that says, hey, I can't do this alone. Your organization might have an energy manager. He or she can't do this all alone. This involves a lot of people and a commitment from all levels of the organization, and the policy is intended to bring everybody together for a shared purpose. Whereas the next thing, the guidelines are a document that I believe needs to be written in order to establish the rules of the road or the rules of engagement, the rules that we're going to use to manage our facilities. When are we going to turn the lights on? When are we going to turn the air conditioning up? How are we going to manage the facilities when they're full of occupants or when they're nearly full of occupants or when people have gone home? How are we going to irrigate our spaces around our schools, around our university? The guidelines, the purpose is to have the conversation with the energy committee so we all agree on what's reasonable, and then we can measure it. We can talk about the way it is now and what it can be, and then that gives you the first glimpse in terms of how much savings may exist within your organization. That conversation is absolutely critical, because if you really want to know how you're doing, you have to compare it to something, and the guidelines are the metric that you compare to. Another thing that I've seen over the course of time working with organizations is there's a lot of dynamic movement that happens. People retire, people leave, people move to different jobs. I think for an organization to maximize its energy efficiency, its energy, reduce its energy loads, they have to set a multi-year vision to drive that long-term success. You've got to put together a 3, a 5-year plan. So if the superintendent leaves or the facility director takes a different job, you have to establish something that everybody agrees is the best path to go down in order to achieve the overall objective. And so again, it takes time, it takes planning, it takes involving more people in the conversation as you scrutinize your organization, the age of the buildings and where the opportunities lie. I'll take you all the way back to the data. You need to look at the data, because the data is going to tell you a lot of the answers to those questions. So I'd love for you to respond to this. Just where do your KPIs originate within your organization? Did they come from the top? Did the CFO, the CEO, somebody say, hey, this is what we need to do? Like, we're going to set these standards and these gas emission standards. Was this provided by maybe somebody downstream, an energy manager or a facility person? because I think it completely changes the dynamic for how you go about this process. When the KPIs are generated without good information, you can set the bar really, really high, so high it might not even be attainable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not critical of that. All I would say is think about that. If your organization already has KPIs, understand the source. Where did they come from? And they might need to be revisited, because I believe in order to have success doing this, the you have to have attainable goals. You can't be so aspirational that it's like you set the bar so high you're never going to get there. It's got to be a reasonable goal, because when it's reasonable, people work harder to achieve it than if they think, if there's no way we're ever going to get there, why even try?
So go ahead and drop you a comment in the chat where your KPIs are coming from. We have a theory that most of them are coming from the top down. At least that's what we
Yep.
hear a lot when we're talking to customers and prospects. But I do think about establishing an energy committee and a policy and these guidelines using data on the upfront can really help support and maybe even correct those KPIs to make them more achievable.
Yeah,
So,
and they just have to be agreed upon. Do you mean they just can't be like a single person's brainchild? This is what it's going to be. It's got to be scrutinized a little bit, and it's got to be real. And I'll take you back to the data. It's going to start with the data. You have to know where you are in order for you to define where you're going to go.
yep.
So,
So
so tra yeah,
data.
so transitioning to the next thing, just gathering in from information. So I've referenced on a number of occasions already, we need to get good data. So collect those utility bills. And you might ask, hey, Tom, what utility bills? I'd say all utility bills. All right. So electrical, gas, water, sewer, you might get phone bills. There might be recycling bills. I don't, I want to encourage you to prioritize some things as we go through this process, but get them all. Because another thing that I've found, and what I've taught people that I've worked with and I've trained people over time is usually when you go down the energy management path, the whole organization starts to revisit everything they do. And there's efficiencies that can be gained in many places, some places that would be unrelated. Okay, you just think like, why? Like one school that I was working with, the energy program got them to buy different paper, because where they were storing the paper and the humidity that was in the room and the way we controlled it was changing. Long story made short is the conversations went from energy management to a different vendor for paper because there was a benefit for doing so. And I just tell that silly little story because I've seen it happen in nearly every client I've worked with. Once you start down this road of energy efficiency, it finds a life of its own. And so if you get all the bills, then you get more informed. And again, you can start to find opportunities to save in different places. The next thing on the list, identify all the meters servicing the facilities. And what I mean by that is field verify. Go out to your buildings, find the electric meter, find the gas meter, the water meter. And I'll tell you, some of them are going to be hard to find. If you're in a university, they might be in the tunnels. If you have a plant, you might be needing to see steam meters or chill water meters. You're trying to get information that's out there. You got to find them all. And similar to what I said several minutes ago, is usually there's mistakes here. You'll be surprised how many mistakes have occurred over time where meters were taken out, replaced, or meters are being charged that don't even exist any longer. Taking the time to find the meters around your organization, you're going to learn a lot unequivocally. Every time I've done it and everybody I've ever taught, that's really where you begin to learn your buildings and understand what's going on. Confirm simple things like meter numbers. Use your phone, take pictures of it, document it. Make sure that meter number matches the bill. I could once again tell you story after story of clients that have recovered thousands and tens of thousands of dollars because of meter mistakes. And it starts with these simple things. Let's find the meter and let's document the meter number. Also, gather key information about your buildings like square footage, mechanical systems, historical data, all of that stuff. When you move up that pyramid and you get into the energy conservation and energy efficiency level, it'll be very helpful. And track building occupancy patterns. The simplest thing you can do to save money is to make sure that the way you manage your buildings is closely tied to the occupants of the buildings. Some buildings have to run 24/7 just because that's just the way they are. That's what's needed. There are people in them all the time. But many spaces are not that way. People come in at 8, they go home at 5, they come in at 4 in the morning, they go home at 8 at night. Usually there are windows of time when buildings are no longer occupied. And that is the first and foremost thing people should be looking at as for ways to save energy is we need to understand where everybody is, who's there, and for how long, so we can tie the schedules to that. I usually jokingly say it's who's, where, and when. That's what you have to answer. Okay, Amber, the next slide, please. So on this slide, we're just talking about maintaining transparency and be clear with your documentation. When I went through this myself, and as I trained other people, is I created documents for myself to learn and to understand. But many times what I learned about that is those documents would also be valuable to share with other people. My mindset as I've gone through this is I shouldn't have to convince people to save energy. I should just be able to find the data and show the data to them that I have seen that has convinced me it's time to make a change. Most people are motivated to do the same things. And if the data is compelling enough for me to change, I need to find a way to be transparent, create the right graph, chart, diagram to convince others, so it's compelling enough for them to change. And so it's an important approach with the data. Use the data. Make sure you make it colorful and easy to understand, because you're going to need to do that in order to convince some people to make some changes. So make sure that communication is open and everybody's able to see it. Some of the software products nowadays have dashboards, and you might find clever ways to write newsletters or share information. Consider all of that as a way to keep people informed as to what's going on. One of the things you have to consider too is where you're going to store the information. Is it in spreadsheets? Is it in some type of utility management system? Your building automation system might allow you to save some documents or store some things, or maybe you have an asset management tool where you're slowly compiling all the information about the buildings. We're all in different spots. My guess is everybody on the call is a different spot. Some are way down the road with their energy conservation, energy efficiency efforts, and others are just at the start line. I think we saw that with the poll in the very beginning. Understand what you have, understand what you're going to need, and just make sure that you're investing things that can be helpful to you, such as some of these things like an energy management system or some asset management tools. They can be a real help as you gather information. Okay, so we have another poll here. So we wanted to find out who's on the call. We've learned that many of you, a majority of you, are maybe have been in the industry for less than 5 years. Some much more. But where are you coming from? Are you an energy manager, a director, a facility director?
The numbers are rolling in. Energy managers are taking the lead. It's almost like a race. Sustainability is close behind.
A lot of others too.
Some facilities, some operations in here. It's great. Great. We'll go ahead and end the poll and show the results. So definitely majority energy managers, with 32%, followed by directors of sustainability.
Awesome.
A lot of others. I wonder what the other. It's great.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious too.
We love to have you.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, Amber, if you could take us to the next slide.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So I want to talk more about this fostering strong relationships. I've mentioned this a couple times in the call, but I want to beat this up a little bit more, where it's very common for organizations to be very silo-based. People just don't have the time to talk with one another. So what you have to do is if you are the person who is driving this forward, if you're one of those energy managers that just responded to the poll where this is your job is to build collaboration and relationships to help make this happen for your organization. Again, I want to encourage you, work with the executive leadership, sit down with them, provide data for them, help them understand the things that you're seeing so that they can be supportive of you. Talk with your facility and operations, bring in custodians. I want you to think about custodians as the first people into a building and many times the last people out of a building. So they are the people that can manage things for you if they understand what is needed. So build relationships. Building staff. Work with the people that are in the building. Many times people are reasonable when they, when they come and they leave, and managing the lights and the other things they have at their workspace. Build relationships, and people will listen. And also, if you have people that are coming in as, I'll call them facility occupants, again, put some things in the wall. Part of this changing the energy culture is having more visible documentation, posters, things in the wall, dashboards, things that people can see. And it will affect people as they come to your buildings. They'll recognize your organization is committed to saving energy. And get to know your utility providers. I probably should have beaten this up a little bit earlier when we were talking about the bills, but boy, you got to get to know your utility providers because they are a wealth of information. Most utility providers assign an account representative to an organization to help them. And so there's likely a person who's out there who's just ready and itching to help you save energy, and you might not even know their name. They many times won't find you, but if you reach out to them, they are glad to help you out. And ask them about rebate programs and incentives. Usually they are very, very helpful. And so put that on your radar. Set up meetings with them, invite them to your office, and just sit and listen, bombard them with questions. And my guess is you'll learn some things to make your organization more efficient.
Cool. And I asked people who were in our other group just to drop their job titles because I think it's really interesting and great to see our ecosystem of folks who are involved in energy and sustainability growing. And there's electrical engineer, senior risk officer, quite a few folks in the utility energy data analyst space, some folks who are in GIS, strategic business analysts. It's great to see like the vast cross-functional capabilities that are coming in and really targeting this issue. It's great.
That's awesome. Okay, Amber, I think we're ready for the next one. So some of these themes again show up again here. Communicate. Whoops. I
Oh,
think
I'm sorry. This is my
Yeah,
fault. Sorry.
not a problem. It's just the communicating consistently, focusing on this behavior change, just making sure that that is your number one bullseye in the beginning. And this third bullet point is just so critical. Recognize behavior change takes time. I want to read that again just because it's so critical. Recognize behavior change takes time. Think about yourself. I'm getting a little gray here around the sides, and I can tell you things scare me a little bit more than they used to in terms of changing my behavior. I'm comfortable with the way things were. Think about just buying a new TV or having a new appliance around the house, how you kind of like the old one better because you knew how the remote worked, all those silly little things in our life, all the apps we use in our phones. People aren't resistant to change. People need time to change. And so the energy manager, the person leading this effort, the whole energy committee needs to understand you have to methodically work through this process, be patient with people, hold people accountable, yes. But if you try to force energy conservation on people, I can tell you because I've seen it happen hundreds of times, people will resist. This has to be something that people decide makes sense to them and they will do it. But if you push on them, they will fight you tooth and nail. So it's a mindset once again. You just can't force it on people, so you have to approach it that way. It doesn't mean you can't teach people aggressively. It doesn't mean you can't set ambitious goals. It just means that this has to be in your back pocket as one of your tools that you realize people need some patience. Okay. Another thing here is highlight benefits beyond energy savings to gain organization-wide buy-in. I had mentioned earlier about this whole idea of if you fix stuff that's not working correctly, you save energy typically, and you also make people more comfortable. Celebrate those things. Absolutely celebrate those things. You might save so much energy, it helps the organization so they don't have to buy new equipment because you've reduced loads. If that happens, celebrate. Again, I can tell you story after story, all sorts of good things that happen. It starts with the process, and the successes are unique to every organization. So be aware of them and share them. It helps build the momentum. So ensure continuous engagement for sustained improvements, absolutely. And another part of that, maybe it's a caveat to that, is reinvest the savings. If you're starting to see savings, you've seen some reductions, take and fix some things, repair some things, spend that savings into more savings by utilizing it. Once again, it builds more momentum and it helps your organization further down the road.
I love
Okay,
it.
Amber?
We're seeing some customers do that in the form of green revolving funds. The money they save, they're able to reinvest in additional projects, and we love to see that.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk a little about learning about your facilities. You'll see here, starting with document current conditions. One of the things that I've seen is that many times people don't feel responsible for what's happening in the facility. The facilities director is just so busy, he or she can't find the time to do these things. The custodians are busy doing X, Y, and Z. And I could just go down the list. Everybody's busy. Somebody has to slow down to go to the facility and understand what's happening in those facilities early in the morning, middle of the day, at night, weekends, holidays if necessary. But you have to document what's going because as you go through those facilities and you audit them, and bullet number 2 is visit the facilities at different times under different conditions, you're going to find things. You'll be very, very surprised. My life experience, when I've walked through, let's say I work with a organization that had 20 buildings. So, building after building after building, you go through over the course of a couple of days, I would find somewhere between 10 and 20% of the HVAC equipment running after hours. And you might say, how could that be? Well, it's just factually what I've seen. And it happens because people are busy. I want to maybe help people understand this point if you haven't been around this very much. Usually when a building is constructed, one of the last steps in its construction is commissioning. Even if a building's being renovated, there's a commissioning process that takes place. Commissioning is one of those things, if budgets are tight, that gets cut out. And so it's very common for buildings to not be commissioned properly at the just before they're utilized by occupants, whether the occupants are moving back in or whether the building is a brand new building and occupants are using it for the first time. And so when that commissioning gets taken away, there are simply mistakes that were made by people. Again, all unintentional. Another philosophy that I have with people is energy programs should only have a windshield. There should be no rear view mirror. The rear view mirror doesn't help you understand or doesn't help solve problems from the past. There's no sense blaming anybody for mistakes there in a building and why things are the way they are. Look out the windshield and go forward. The buildings are the way they are. If things are not running properly, find solutions and fix those things. And if it's over a relatively short period of time, sure, hold contractors accountable for fixing stuff. But if it was 5 years ago, you got to move on. You got to focus on the repair and getting it right. Looking in the rearview mirror just slows you down. And it's negativity that the program usually doesn't benefit from. So audit all levels of facility. Get on the roof, get in the basement, walk around the outside. Once again, you'll see all sorts of things that will likely pop out at you. When you start flipping switches and you're ready to make changes, focus initially on the big stuff. Chillers, pumps, motors, boilers, all those things use an awful lot of energy. So if you can make subtle little changes to those types of things, how they run, how they function, you'll start to save money quickly. Identify all that HVAC equipment that's off schedule, as I mentioned a minute ago. Again, 10 to 20%. I bet if you were to walk through a bunch of buildings, you'd agree with me. There's stuff running that should not be running. Find solutions for that. Dig into it. Again, there's savings to be found there. And another sense that I'd urge you to, besides just using your eyes, is listen very carefully. And it's one of the benefits for going through a building after hours is many times sounds will indicate stuff that's running that you never knew was running. And again, you can find solutions and save energy.
This is why I love having you on our team, Tom, because I would have never thought to walk through an empty building and listen. Let's just use your ears.
Yeah, it's remarkable how much you hear after hours.
That's really, really clever.
So as we wind down the presentation, as you might imagine, it's about taking action. You don't save energy if you don't take action. So you have to put the time in, get these bills, start this process, work up that energy pyramid as we've talked about in this presentation, but then you got to take action. So identify those billing areas, call the representative in your office, get resolution to those things. Once again, if you have hundreds of bills, it's very likely you're going to see significant savings from that. It's just a statistical reality. I mean, there's just so many, it's going to happen. The next thing is align time of day schedule to the occupancy. So if you have people coming in your building at 8 o'clock and they go home at 5 o'clock, it's an office building. Make sure the building's turning on early enough for people to be comfortable when they come in and long enough that if people stay a few minutes after, they're comfortable. But let's run that building on a schedule. Just make sure the schedule, very similar to the programmable thermostat in your home, just do something that makes sense. There will always be time later to tighten it up and see improvement. But initially, that can have a really, really big impact on your bills. Take a look at your occupied and unoccupied set points. Many organizations run occupied set points very close to their unoccupied set points. So for instance, a building might heat to 70 and cool to 73, and maybe its unoccupied heating set point is 67. So it's like 3 degrees lower. And its unoccupied cooling set point is 76. It's 3 degrees higher. That's a good place to start, but I think you'll see you can be far more aggressive than that, particularly over unique periods of time like holidays when buildings might shut down for longer periods of time. You have to look at your schedule, look at your organization, understand what's happening. But building setbacks are another great source of savings as long as they're safely and reasonably implemented. So take advantage of that unoccupied time. What I would say is conduct a soft recommissioning of the building automation system. And what I mean by that is take a look at those set points. Are they consistent? Because the next bullet point you'll notice I'm going to suggest standardized set points. And I know every space is different. Every occupant is different, and there needs to be a reasonable approach to making sure people are comfortable. But I think you'll find if there hasn't been a lot of attention in looking at the building automation system over the course of time, set points will be all over the map. And if you start with the simple ones like occupied, unoccupied temperatures, you start to look at airflows and static pressures and the other things that might be part of a more sophisticated system, I think you're going to find inconsistencies. And back to what I was saying 30 minutes ago, if you have collected all those documents I mentioned earlier, it's going to allow you to better understand your building and correct those things, because very likely there's energy savings to be found there as well. So I think that takes us to the end of the presentation, if I'm not mistaken. And oops, Amber, I think you might be on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you
Sorry
bet.
about that. Thank you so much, Tom. It is just such a gift and an honor to have you on our team, and just seeing some of the engagement in the chat from the folks who are on the call and the number of people who are on the call today. It just shows that this type of content is what people are craving. So if you guys enjoyed this session with Tom, we are going to be doing a lot more. So first, I want you to make sure you go and follow Thomas Diliberti on LinkedIn, because he's going to be posting more webinars that dive a little bit deeper into some of the things we talked about today. He'll also be posting blogs and industry events and things that, at EnergyCAP we're engaging in, and really focused on educational, right? I think Thomas's background as an educator really shines through, and we're just so excited to have him here to dig into some of these topics that are critical for energy programs and successful energy management. So if you liked what you saw and you want to dig in a little bit more with us, we're going to host a series of educational deeper dives, our 201 energy management webinars on the topics that you see here. So if you are interested in joining our 201 series, I'm going to pull up a poll here. Feel free to let us know via poll if you'd like us to sign you up. Hold on here. Launching poll. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the polls on Zoom. So yeah, please let us know if you're interested. We'd love to automatically sign you up for the whole series. I'll just go back one slide so you can see what the series topics are. And yeah, Tom will be digging into each of these topics. And I also have to share a little bit about what we do at EnergyCAP. If you're not familiar with us, we are a software platform that aggregates your utility, your energy, your building automation system, your sensor, your carbon accounting information, all in a single source of truth for better energy management, utility bill management, and sustainability reporting, and overall facility operations and efficiency. And so that's what we do. Tom has been a user of our platform for many years, and we have, over 800 customers around the world who are using our platforms today to execute their energy management programs on their site. So we'd be happy to talk to you as well. But really, the whole point of this particular presentation is strictly educational. So thank you. There's a bunch of you, over 100 of you, who would like to join the next webinar series. So that's great. It's good to know that what we're doing here matters and that you like it. So with that, we can move on to questions. And I think we've got a couple in the chat that I will pull up. Okay, Tom, here's one for you. How would you identify mistakes in the 3 to 5% of incorrect utility bills?
Yeah.
Question.
Let me just kind of say it's without a bill in front of me, it's a little bit harder, but I definitely will talk about that in one of the webinars. Where mistakes occur are with the rate tariff. And if you're not familiar with the rate tariff, what a rate tariff is, it's essentially the plan or the rate code for how you're paying your bill. Usually it's based on the size of a building and its load. And so let's suppose you have a small building, a 20,000 square foot building, and it's paying on a rate code for a 100,000 square foot building. It's possible you're overpaying because it's an apple mixed in with some oranges. It just doesn't sync up. And so the way you start to isolate that is you look at all your buildings, you look at the rate tariffs, you start to group them, you benchmark them, you look at them in comparison to one another, and many times something will pop out as just, that's unusual. Why is that so different than the others? That's one way. Another thing that happens is there are mistakes with the meter multiplier. I like to describe the meter multiplier as we are all aware of different ways to measure distances: inches, feet, miles, meters. There's many units of measure for distance. The meter multiplier functions in that way for an electric meter. So if it's a large building and there's energy flowing through it, it's got to have a larger meter multiplier to properly measure the amount of energy that's flowing into the building. And where the mistake comes in is right on the glass. It'll show the meter multiplier. It might be 1, or it could be 5, could be 100. It needs to match the number that's on the bill. So when you're out verifying your meters in the field, I would take your bill with you and confirm the meter multiplier matches. And I would guess for the hundreds of buildings I've gone to, maybe 1 in 100 have been wrong. So it's not a huge thing, but I got to tell you, one of them was way off to the tune of $750,000. It had a huge impact on the bottom line. And so can it be significant? Absolutely. Is it going to be everywhere? No. But you got to cross all your T's and dot all your I's. And it's easy to check. So check it and maybe you'll find a gold mine. You just never know. I teasingly say there's a lot of Easter eggs out there. You got to go find it.
Yeah, and I'll just add some color to that. You obviously can do all of this manually and looking at your data, whether it's in a spreadsheet. EnergyCAP, if you're pulling all your bill data into EnergyCAP, it will automatically apply all of our audits that we have, over 48 audit rules that are running to look for these types of issues or mistakes on your bills, and it will flag them for you to review. And we see on average like 10% of bills are being flagged for errors. So it's super helpful to have all of that automated. And then we got
Absolutely.
a lot of questions about utility bills, Tom. So
Yeah.
here's one I think that's a follow-up to your previous question. If you want folks to look for meters, does that mean that an organization might be paying for a meter that doesn't belong to them? Can you elaborate?
Absolutely. Unequivocally. It's once again, if it's a bigger organization that has hundreds of meters, I'd almost bet on it. I think the probability that you're paying for some meters, and again, these could be very trivial. I've had a couple of cases where clients recovered 20, 30, $50,000 because they were paying for meters that went away. The biggest one was a water meter in California that it was a school district who was paying for this water meter for an adjacent property. The school district sold the property years and years ago. The bill continued to go to the school, and the person in the accounting office, they didn't know. They were just acting in good faith, assumed it was another bill they needed to pay. And in this case here, the utility paid the school district back, but not all of it. There was a statute of limitations. I think they went back 7 years. And so even though the error occurred before that, and so similar to the theme of the other comments, you just got to check it out. You just got to dig into it and see. But the more bills you have, the higher probability that there will be mistakes like that. And sometimes the amounts are negligible, and other times they're very substantial. You just don't know. And it's exciting when you find one of those, though. It's so awfully neat.
Yep. And Michelle Kroll commenting in, happens all the time. Building gets sold, new owner, utilities don't get switched over. Seems like
Yeah.
that's a very common use case. And it
Yeah.
came up, we did a survey of our customers on where they found the most savings. And that was definitely one of the audit flags that triggered some of the most savings for our
Yeah,
customers.
I think it has a lot to do with the type of organization it is, too, whether it's a hospitality situation, whether it's a school, a university, hospital. It really depends upon the market you're in, the likelihood of these things, but certainly that there's a very high probability if you have different occupants and leases and stuff like that. That's for sure.
Yep. Here's a good one. When collecting historical bill data, how far back should we look?
Awesome question. I actually intended to say this back during the middle of the webinar. I would go back at least 3 years. So 3 years would be my short answer, but I would say is get as much as you can. Many times, if you build that relationship with your utility providers, they can run a report and go back for years and years, 5 or 7 years. And to them, it's data that's in a database. And so they're just doing a query and they're just doing an output for you. So if you can get that much data, I would strongly urge that you do it. But then you have to wait a time. Do you know what I mean? If you have to pay for it, I mean, many times they'll do it for free. Many times they'll limit it to 3 years. So I think you have to consider all the variables, try to get at least 3, but if the rest of it's free and you get more, then I'd say go for it. Get as much data as you can.
Yeah, we recommend at least 12. So you can start at least tracking year over year trends.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the bare minimum.
Yeah,
Uh,
12 months. Yeah, 12
at
months.
least,
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm saying 3 years, just in case I didn't say the unit of measure. Yes, 3 years or for sure 12 months. Absolutely. Yep.
yep. Okay, a question from that came through on the chat. How do you go about utility auditing? Is that directly with the utility provider? We kind of tapped on this a little bit, but
Yeah, what
maybe
I would say is I think you have to put the apples with the apples, the oranges with the oranges. And what I mean by that is very likely if you fan out all your utility bills on a big table and you find buildings that are similar size and have similar rate codes, or as Amber was saying, if you use software, like our software allows you to take all that data and put it in, and then it will sort it for you. And then you can compare things that should be similar with one another. You can benchmark them. So the first thing to do is to get all the data in one place. Again, could be a spreadsheet, sort it by rate code and see where it goes from there. Identify the anomalies, and usually that will spin off into other questions, other things you're uncertain about, more conversation or questions for your account representatives from the utility company. But it really starts, you have to get your mind around it first. You have to get it in one spot.
we have a really cool water bill spotting an error on a water bill. If Daniela can share the link with you, anonymous attendee. You didn't drop your name, but that's okay. It's a really cool way to see like how you can identify an error in the EnergyCAP platform. It's a walkthrough tour. So Daniela maybe can drop it in the chat and you can check it out just to give you an idea of like how our audits work and how you can easily catch it in a platform like EnergyCAP.
Yep.
How are we doing on time? We got 4 minutes. We got a bunch of questions keep coming in. Well, there's one that I'll address real quick is how do I get in contact with EnergyCAP to renew my services? Email sales@energycap.com and someone will get back to you. And let's see. You said listen for things during unoccupied hours. Let's assume a person can actually access the space outside of normal hours. What are you listening for?
Well, one of the things that's very common is fans that are supposed to be off will be running. So I agree. You always have to do this safely. I don't want to talk you guys into doing things that are unsafe too. So make sure you have the right access, the right permissions, you're doing things in a safe manner. But what you normally hear during unoccupied time are either fans that are blowing HVAC, so they're distributing air into a building through the ventilation systems properly, other than they should be off because they're very likely scheduled off. And another big one, and this is why I mentioned getting the roof, are exhaust fans. Exhaust fans are pushing a lot more air than you realize. And if you think about this, an exhaust fan typically just a small bathroom exhaust fan, and maybe even the fan that you have in your house in a bathroom, that might pull out of your house. A cubic foot is about the size of a basketball. So if you think about it in terms of basketballs, a lot of those fans, again, just thinking about your house in your bathroom, that fan will pull out 100 basketballs worth of air every minute. And so you might think about, well, that means the whole bathroom would have been full of 100 basketballs. It's like in 1 minute, it sucks all that air out. And what happens is if you've sucked all the air out of the bathroom, the air has to be replaced from some other place, which means it's coming from outside. And if it's coming from outside, very likely it needs to be heated and cooled. It might have humidity and things you don't want. And so exhaust fans are a big thing to consider because they move way more air than what you realize. And back to the question, like, what are you listening for? You're really listening for all fans and pumps, but the biggest one is these exhaust fans because they can dramatically affect how a building operates and create all sorts of issues in the building that you don't want. Primarily, the humidity. I'll say humidity for now, but there's other things as a result of high humidity that can happen too. And so that's a whopper. Exhaust fans are big.
Fabulous. A comment from our friend Michelle Markovitz at Miami-Dade County. She added to the point of historical bill data, it may be helpful to look at pre-pandemic data if you're comparing during pandemic years. Really
Abs-
good point.
Absolutely. Yeah. It has to be that apples to apples comparison. So yeah, the pandemic is a kink for all of us. So yes, get as much data as you can. And I would keep the pandemic data but I
Mhm.
would caveat it, mark it, isolate it in some way so you've got it, but that way you're not using it for comparison. Absolutely, for sure.
Awesome. And last question here. Oh, questions keep coming in. Let's see how much time we got. We can do one more. In the spirit of focusing on the sphere of influence, what might a person who isn't authorized to visit a site or influence organizational behavior do? The individual may be concerned, but the actions may be out of their influence. Any ideas?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before. If you are going to be a frequent attendee of my webinars, you'll find out that I'm a very transparent person. Just I'm as honest the day is long. And why I say that is I would confront these things head on, meaning that if you in good faith want to try to help an organization save energy, save money, and do things for the right reason, I think you just got to get in front of the people who will listen to you and have the conversation. Just say, hey, this is I want to donate my time, or I just feel like this is important to our organization. Can I do this to provide you information? And I think most people will listen. They might be a little suspicious if your mission is altruistic, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And I think I'd start there. And again, if you come back to the webinar, please give me some feedback. Let's talk through it, and I'll give it some thought and maybe give you some more ideas in the future too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom. This was awesome. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and joined. We will be subscribing the folks who wanted to join the 201 series. We will be subscribing you to that series, which will begin, I believe, mid-April, mid-month, this month. So thank you again. And if you have any questions, feel free to email sales@energycap.com and we can get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.